What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, August 29th, 2016, start of a brand new week. Also happens to be my birthday. Also the birthday of Michael Jackson, which really kind of blows that whole astrology thing out of the water. And I've been informed it's also the birthday of Senator John McCain, which really blows that whole astrology thing out of the water. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, but unfortunately Vonage has messed up the toll-free line again. So grab a paper and pencil. I'm going to give you 3 numbers that you can call to possibly get on through and talk with us today. And those numbers are 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, and 512-716-1897. So hopefully that will get you in here, and you know, we just have all this stuff that we need to be dealing with. And it's been a bad, hard day all around because I got up this morning and normally I have a dual monitor set up. One of the monitors had died, and because they were both the same model, bought at the same time, and because we live in a world of planned obsolescence, I figured the second monitor is going to go any second. So my unexpected birthday present to myself are going to be another pair of monitors to keep this whole system running just a little bit longer. So if I sound a little cranky and grumpy, that's why. Now, getting on to the news, we have some really nasty storms out here. Hurricane Madeline, which is heading toward Hawaii, but it's swinging south, but we're going to start getting wind and rain from that tomorrow. Then there's Hurricane Lester, which is still headed right for us at the moment. And the local media is going on and on about how this is just so inconvenient for President Obama because he's coming into town for Wednesday night and the World Conservation Congress starting on Thursday, and they may have to be dealing with inclement weather. So between Obama's motorcade, the weather, and the construction of the light rail, traffic's going to be a nightmare in Honolulu, and I'm just glad I don't have to go anywhere near that part of town. And I have a message for the United States Secret Service. If you're going to come on by and harass the food distribution group again, bring some food this time. I mean, come on. Have a little bit of a heart and soul out there. Well, the scandals continue to swirl around Ms. Hillary Clinton. And a lot of people are reporting on all of these emails that have come on out showing that there was a pay-for-play operation going on while she was Secretary of State. That if you wanted any business before the Secretary of State, how you got in was you first made a donation to the Clinton Foundation. Pay-for-play. It's corruption. It's flat-out corruption. It's a violation of federal law. And in the good old days, this scandal would be filed under gross conflict of interest and government corruption. Today, the corporate media says, that's just news. Not worth talking about. This is business as usual. I mean, after all, the Clintons have been doing pay-for-play that we know of all the way back to Bill Clinton's presidency with the Commerce Department. So you should all be used to it by now. This is how these things are handled. If you want access to the government, you start off with a huge, huge donation, which most of us cannot do, obviously. And if Hillary Clinton was running the State Department on large cash donations, open the doors, she's going to do the same thing with the White House. Ordinary Americans are not going to have any access to the administration if Hillary steals the White House. The doors are only going to open for millionaires and billionaires. Now, apparently, one of the emails that has come on out was showing how the Clinton Foundation, after getting a huge donation, was trying to arrange a meeting between the donor and the president of China. That's how far their tentacles are reaching around the globe. It's just a huge, huge corrupt mess. Now, journalist Adam Davidson, who writes the New York Magazine, and he has his own show on NPR, says the Clinton Foundation is all about buying access. It's gross. And he says right now Hillary Clinton is beholden to scumbags around the world. And that is a big problem. These people did not donate to her campaign and to the foundation out of the goodness of their heart and a desire to do well in the world. They're expecting something back at your expense. Now, remember Charles Ortel? He did an analysis of the Clinton Foundation and said it is clearly a fraudulent charity. It's a slush fund. And starting on the evening of September 6, 2016, Charles Ortel is going to release one by one the 40 exhibits that he has proving that the Clinton Foundation is a fraud, that it's not really a charity, that it's only done a token nod toward charitable work for the sake of public appearances, and other than that, it's just a huge slush fund, and everybody in Washington, D.C. is dipping in on it. Now, Hillary Clinton is out there trying to replay the scare tactics of the Cold War of the 1950s and 1960s, and she's out there describing Vladimir Putin as the godfather of extreme nationalism. Now, to the New World Order people, nationalism is the bad guy. Oh, people who love their own country over other countries, we can't have that. And so Hillary Clinton is blaming Putin for this sudden surge among people all over the world to want to put their country's interests ahead of everybody else. Well, that's only natural. I mean, here in the United States of America, what we have in terms of this nation was built generation after generation after generation after generation of the American people with the objective that this would be our legacy to the next generation of American people. This is our children's inheritance that we have built. And Hillary wants to basically take our inheritance for our children and barter it away to illegal immigrants and refugees in exchange for their votes. We're going to do a little shout out here to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And a reminder again, Vonage has lost our toll-free number. And there are 3 numbers I'm going to give you if you want to call into the show. Area code 512-716-1603. Area code 512-716-1883. Area code 512-716-1897. And you might as well save that little slip of paper because I have a feeling, based on my own experience with Vonage, it's not going to work out. All these incompatibilities. Now, Hillary is going even further, and she is now trying to blame Vladimir Putin is behind the alt-right conspiracy against her. They're calling it alt-right, but this is just basically a repackaging of the vast right-wing conspiracy that Hillary Clinton invented, trying to deflect allegations of Bill Clinton's philandering with Paula Jones, and as we know, it turned out it had all really happened. But that was her defense. Oh, it's a vast right-wing conspiracy. There's nothing there. They're a bunch of kooks and wackos. And that's what they're doing with this alt-right. The word doesn't even really have a meaning to it. It's just a phrase. Oh, they're just alt-right. It's a way of dismissing people, like the phrase conspiracy theory, which they're using all over the place. And again, it's just part of, like political correctness, it's a tactic to stifle and repress any reports that are critical of Hillary Clinton, her State Department career, the email server, the corruption, pay for play, and her health. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Dave in Etheric, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, aloha there, Michael. I've got 3 things. First of all, happy birthday.
Thank you, sir.
Second of all, I'm glad you like my idea of registering as a Democrat to defeat this stuff. I had another thought on that. We actually have another incentive for doing that. Since they're over-polling Democrats to get these corporate media polls, we can start to skew that if we start registering a bunch of people as Democrats that are planning on voting for Trump, and when the pollsters call you, you tell them I'm voting for Trump. And the last thing that I've got, I'm working on a cybersecurity survival guide at crucialnonsense.com. I think I've covered about everything. I've certainly gotten a lot of inspiration off what really happened. So have a look at that, everybody. Send me questions, comments, feedback. I want to make that the most comprehensive online survival guide possible because we have a lot of criminals and a lot of bad stuff out there, and a little bit of common sense, you can be a little bit safer. That's all I got, Michael. I'll let you get back to it. 7-3.
All right, thank you very much here. And email me that URL so I can look at it and link to it from WhatReallyHappened.com because The scammers and cyber criminals, they're just completely out of control. It's a tsunami of cybercrime about which the U.S. government isn't doing a single thing about, probably because they're getting a piece of the action. So, Dave, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, interestingly enough, Claire and I were watching a TV show last night, and it had a whole bunch of these Hillary commercials. Actually, it was just one commercial being played over and over and over and over again, trying to sell the message that Trump's temper and his tendency to speak his mind might provoke war with Russia. And it was kind of weak. I don't think it's going to get a lot of traction, mostly because we're seeing Hillary Clinton is clearly laying the foundation for increasing hostility with Russia. And Hillary Clinton and Vladimir Putin aren't the best of friends. She's out there blaming him for everything at this point, and she's making a bad situation worse. Hillary Clinton is very much in favor of war with Russia and war with China to try and reassert the U.S. dollar's hegemonic domination over the world economy. And it's not working. It's already crumbling. But they can't give up. So let's get on to Hillary Clinton's health issues, because it's a legitimate concern. We're seeing this story, a brain-damaged U.S. president with finger on the nuclear button. And they're raising a very serious reality here. Hillary Clinton herself says she gets brain short circuits. Huma Abedin, in a State Department email, said Hillary Clinton gets confused. She's forgetful. She's on serious medications that can affect how you think. And it's a serious, serious possibility. If we have a president with dementia, anything could happen. Now, I understand we're supposedly protected by the two-man rule, but we know that Hillary is going to surround herself with nothing but parasitic sycophants, in other words, yes men and yes women, who will do whatever she tells them to do. This is very, very dangerous. Now, Dr. Bob Lahita, he's the chairman of the Department of Medicine in Newark Beth Israel Medical Center, and he's called on TV a lot, CBS, MSNBC, ABC, and Fox, and he's out there saying concerns over Hillary's health is not just a conspiracy theory. There are legitimate questions that need to be asked, and the American people have a right to know that whoever's sitting in that Oval Office is thinking clearly. Now, in the past, presidents' medical problems have been hidden from the public. They hid John F. Kennedy's back injury. They hid Roosevelt's polio, but those didn't affect their ability to make decisions. On the other hand, they did hide the fact that during Ronald Reagan's second term, he was descending into Alzheimer's. And that was a disservice to the American people. And, of course, George Herbert Walker Bush was in the background actually running things as Reagan began to deteriorate. Now, the Huffington Post has gone on a grand purge. They're deleting all the articles posted on their site questioning Hillary's health, and they have terminated one of their contributors who was writing articles saying there's an issue here that we need to look at. And this happening just days after Dr. Drew was canned from headline news for the same reason. The dictatorship is fully on display. If you say bad things about Hillary, you will not be allowed to continue your job in the corporate media. Welcome to my world. Now, okay, the Pastor Scott over on MSNBC was relating the story about how this whole Obama birther issue was made up by Hillary Clinton's campaign in the 2008 elections. Joy Reid just blows a gasket and cuts the guest off. They don't want any of this stuff coming on out because Hillary's out there. Hillary literally came on out and said Donald Trump was behind the Obama birther conspiracy. And it was her. She has no shame. Hillary's out there right now using the shooting death of Seth Rich to push for more gun control. Now, Donald Trump has hurled a defy, saying that he has absolutely no problem releasing his detailed medical records. This is in response to CNN trying to reverse this whole thing by saying, well, we know Hillary Clinton's in perfect health. What about Donald Trump? Boy, he sure looks like he's on death's door. He's about ready to fall over. No, he isn't. He's bounding around those stages and podiums. He's got energy. He's very clearly healthy. And he's out there saying, I'll release all my detailed medical records if Hillary will. And Hillary's campaign is so far mum on that one. All they've got is a single letter written by a doctor saying, absolutely without any question, Hillary Clinton is suited to serve as President of the United States of America, which I'm not willing to accept without some kind of backdrop, especially when you remember that doctor who just got put in jail for 45 years for telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer so that he could sell them chemotherapy and radiation treatments. So just because somebody has MD after their name does not automatically make them an honest person. Doctors can be bought. The vaccine companies are doing it all the time. Now, there's a story that is coming out of, let's see, where was this again? USHerald.com. Some of the documents about Benghazi that were supposed to have been turned over to congressional investigators and never were. It was claimed they had simply disappeared and vanished. They have been found hidden in Hillary's deleted email file. For all of Hillary's caution, she was using this bleach bit erasure tool, and she still missed some stuff. And they found these Benghazi documents in the deleted email file. Now, the Judge Dimitrolis gave the State Department until September 13th to review the emails and turn over anything that is responsive to the various Freedom of Information Act lawsuits that have been filed regarding what happened at Benghazi. The State Department is saying they're not going to be able to produce any of these emails until, somewhere after November 9th, making it very obvious that this is politicized. I have a solution. Let's have the State Department turn over the emails as they find them. So at least part of them are available for the voters to see. This idea that we have to wait until they have searched them all out and they turn them over in a lump, conveniently after the election, I don't think so. Remember what Richard Nixon used to say, it's not the crime that gets you, it's that cover-up. There was even a commentator on Fox News earlier today saying that's what Hillary's problem is. It isn't what she did at the State Department, it isn't the corruption at the Clinton Foundation, it's the perception of a massive cover-up in which the corporate media is now seen as totally complicit. They're literally destroying their own credibility in their efforts to support Hillary Clinton. Now, the State Department is also saying that they're refusing to release Hillary Clinton's State Department calendar, who she met, when, where, how, and why, until after the election. Again, we're looking at a serious cover-up by the State Department trying to protect Hillary Clinton. So we're looking at all of this stuff that's piling on up. Assange is saying the next WikiLeaks data dump is going to be a game changer. We're finding more of this email coming out of the FBI story. We're seeing very open corporate media bias against Donald Trump. And now we're finding out, of course, that the corporate media have been among her biggest donors. Whatever happened to We Report, You Decide? Whatever happened to fairness and objectivity? Whatever happened to journalistic integrity is what I want to know. Because it does seem to be gone. I mean, I took a journalism course in college. And back then, admittedly long ago, fairness, objectivity, those were the hallmarks. Not anymore. You're either with Hillary Clinton or you're out of a job, is the message they're handing on down. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So let's start taking a closer look at Hillary's closest associate and aide, Huma Abedin. Boy, it's a rough day for her. She's looking at, she's under investigation herself. Now it's come on out that she also violated Title 18, Section 793 by leaving classified information on the front seat of her car. And now it turns on out, apparently Huma Abedin's mother was involved with the publication of this book that is seen as very anti-woman, and basically was out there saying the merits of sexual submissiveness, child marriage, lashings and stonings for adulterous women, genital mutilation. Said the only place where Muslim women have a right to participate alongside men is in violent jihad. So that's coming on out. And you have to wonder what the heck is going on. What are these people thinking? Remember Anthony Weiner and his wiener? And that huge sexting scandal? He was sending pictures of his private parts to women who did not want the attention, and it cost him his career in Congress. You'd think this guy would have learned his lesson, but apparently no. He's still doing it. And the New York Post broke this story about how Anthony Weiner was sending inappropriate sexual messages to a woman who did not want them, including pictures of his tumescent state, clothed, but still obviously tumescent, with his infant son right next to him. And you got to wonder what's going on. Now, Huma Abedin has finally said enough is enough. They're going for a separation. Yeah. You think maybe it's time for that? But here's what I'm wondering, and I've brought this up before. We're seeing this very bizarre behavior coming out of politicians. Sometimes it seems like they can't control their impulses, and maybe it's because growing up with wealth and privilege, they never learned that they had to. But we also know that a lot of people are on prescription antidepressants, and we know that prescription antidepressants, one of the symptoms is poor control of impulses, some of which will result in suicide or mass violence. But it's not an either-or situation. It's a continuum. And we already documented how the per capita increase in domestic violence parallels the per capita increase in the use of prescription antidepressants. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask if the pharmaceutical corporations are literally drugging us into aberrant behavior. I mean, for Weiner to first of all do this all over again when his wife is so publicly visible, for Weiner to do this when it opens him up for blackmail, to do it with his kid lying on the bed right next to him, this doesn't strike me as normal behavior. Maybe it's normal for a member of Congress. I don't know. But I'm willing to give Anthony the benefit of the doubt here and say that he's suffering from a pharmacological effect. With the permission and blessing of his doctor and the local pharmacy. But I think there's a serious problem with these medications. And it goes beyond mass violence and suicide. It's affecting all of our behavior. Road rage, bar fights, violence in general, sexually inappropriate behavior. It needs to be looked at. Now, Dr. Martin Luther King's niece is endorsing Donald Trump. It came on out. Dr. Evita King said that his plan for the black community is promising. She fully agrees with many things that Trump is saying. There's a lot of support for Donald Trump among the black population, primarily based on a sentiment echoed by the Black Lives Matter leadership that Hillary Clinton may say all the right things that the black voters want to hear, but they understand she'll never keep her word. That is just the way Hillary Clinton is. Now, as you know, we're coming up on the debates. We know that Hillary is probably going to be using one of these earpieces so that Donald... Whoops, got to take a break here. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as I was starting to say before we went into the commercial break here, as you know, we're coming up on the debates. We are hearing reports that Hillary is going to be using an in-ear transceiver so that Donald Trump will not be debating Hillary Clinton. He'll be debating a whole room full of Hillary advisors. And we already know from leaks coming out from the Hillary campaign, their strategy is going to be to cause Donald Trump to lose his temper. which is not supposed to be a very good thing to see somebody do. Coming back on the other side, though, we have this article that came out of beforeitsnews.com saying that Donald Trump can sink Hillary Clinton by just mentioning 6 specific emails in the upcoming debates that talk about her handling of Benghazi. Now that those have surfaced again, those are a potent weapon. Now, WikiLeaks just held a poll talking about national security, and it's in response to that U.S. Army presentation that listed Hillary Clinton as an insider threat to the security of the nation. The slide's been taken down, it's been Orwellized, but the Army confirmed, yes, it was real. It wasn't some hoax made up by Hillary Clinton's enemies. It was really there. So WikiLeaks had this poll. Who is the biggest threat to national security? And they had Hillary Clinton, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and Edward Snowden. And needless to say, Hillary Clinton, landslide victory, 86%. She is the biggest threat to national security. And Hillary's shills were inside this poll saying, well, it should be Donald Trump. He's not even on the list. He's the biggest threat to national security. He's stealing every secret of the United States and sending it to Vladimir Putin, which is nonsense. Donald Trump does not have a security clearance. He doesn't work in government. He's not in a position to betray secrets the way Hillary Clinton was. Now, a lot of people are coming back and they're trying to attack Donald Trump on his immigration position. And they're saying, oh, he's waffling, he's changing his mind. And Trump came on out and said, no. If he wins the White House, he's going to deport illegal immigrants immediately. And this is not an issue of race. It's not an issue of tolerance. It's an issue of the legality of their being here at all. And all Donald Trump is saying, this country has a right to a reasonable immigration policy where everybody who wants to come to this country goes through that process of being vetted to find out if they have contagious diseases, to find out if they have criminal records, to find out if they're fleeing prosecution from their home country. In other words, a reasonable immigration policy is only going to allow people to immigrate to this country who will be a benefit to our economy and our society. And this ridiculous open door policy that George Soros and his friends are pushing has led to these incredible disasters all over Europe. Because when you have an open door policy, what you're getting are not the best representatives of those source countries. You're getting people who couldn't make it at home. You're getting people who are fleeing criminal prosecution. You're getting people who are being lured into Europe and the United States because they're being told if they can get here, there's going to be all kinds of free stuff for them to have. And people with that mindset are not going to be a benefit to our society. They're coming in with a sense of entitlement. Over in Germany, a lot of their refugees are saying, no, we don't have to get jobs. We're Merkel's guests. They're supposed to be taking care of us. That's what they were told to get them to make their trip. Now, there's a new phenomenon out there called the Trumpocrats. And that is being seen among members of the Democratic Party. Lifelong members of the Democratic Party are leaving the Democratic Party. And they don't want to call themselves Republicans, but they're calling themselves Trumpocrats. Large numbers of them are those who are very angry at what happened to Bernie Sanders and the very obvious machinations of the Democratic National Committee and Hillary's campaign to keep Bernie Sanders out of the nomination. And remember, there was a study done that said had the DNC and Hillary not stolen all the primary votes that they had, Bernie Sanders would have won the nomination in a landslide. And these lifelong Democrats are deserting the party for ideological reasons as well. The Democrats used to be the party of the blue-collar workers. And today, the Democrats are the party of pandering to illegal immigrants, refugees, and supporting the big banks. Now, the Republicans are doing the same thing, but that was always a point of their identity. That's what we're here for. Clinton has lost 7 points in 3 days in the national polling. The corporate media is still quoting polls from a week ago to say that Hillary is way out in front and you Trump voters don't even bother showing up on Election Day. Don't worry, we'll vote on your behalf. We've got your registrations. We'll make sure that a vote gets cast in your name. Now, as you know, one of the lawsuits that is moving forward is a class action lawsuit on behalf of all the Bernie Sanders supporters who are suing the Democratic National Committee for the return of all their campaign donations because of the fraud that was perpetrated against their candidate and against their interests. And interestingly enough, when one of the recent court cases, the lawyers and the plaintiffs came on out to be interviewed by the media, and a Department of Homeland Security truck parked by the curb, totally empty, the horn started blaring over and over and over again to make it impossible for the media to interview these lawyers. I mean, the childishness of such behavior to try and deny these people their right to tell the world what's going on here. Now, Representative Steny Hoyer is out there saying that Trump as president would be dangerous for Israel. And he thinks it would be perilous for Israel if Donald Trump were to become America's next commander-in-chief. Harumph, harumph, harumph. Okay. If Steny Hoyer is so worried about Israel instead of the country he is standing on, I think it's time we start a crowdfunding movement to buy Steny Hoyer and all these other Israel firsters a one-way ticket to Israel. Let's round them all up, put them in a cargo plane, and just drop them on Tel Aviv. If they are so much in love with Israel and want to put Israel's interests first and foremost in their mind, let them. We just don't need them here anymore. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Jeff in Idaho, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Here's a thing that you're just talking about, known as the McCarran-Walter Act, the Immigration Act, Naturalization of 1952. Here's the paragraph. Suspension of entry or imposition of restriction by President. Whenever the President finds that the entry of aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, the President may, by promulgation, for such period as shall be deemed necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens of any class, aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or imposed on the entry of aliens any restriction he may deem to be appropriate. Jimmy Carter in 1979 used it to basically keep out 15,000 Iranians. So that's the one thing you should look up. It's called the McCarran-Walter Act, the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1952. This is from Chris in Las Vegas. He sent me an email on this a couple days ago.
Yeah, no, we talked about this before, and in the context of this idea where the American people were saying we have a right to close the border to all these immigrants coming in from Mexico, and the liberals were out there saying, no, the law is we have to let them in. And that turned out to be complete nonsense. The president does have the authority, has had the authority since 1952 to simply say, we're going to close the borders to this particular class of people. If they're carrying contagious diseases, we're not going to let them in. If they've got criminal records in their home countries, we're not going to let them in. But Obama is fully on board with this New World Order agenda. They want to destroy the identity of our nation to make it easier to blur it with the rest of the planet. I mean, we're seeing all these people come on out and saying that the dilution of white America is a good thing. And no, it isn't. It's just they're out there thinking they have the right to play God with the rest of the planet and just try this little experiment in social engineering. And when you look back at the history of all the social engineering experiments done by the liberals going all the way back to Margaret Mead and Coming of Age of Samoa, the record of failure after failure after failure is a red warning sign. It's time to stop tinkering with humanity. Because Coming of Age in Samoa, which is the foundation of that whole liberal philosophy, that allows them to tinker with our lives was a hoax. It was a fraud. It was an absolute academic piece of crud. And it's been discredited over and over again, but the liberals won't give up on it.
Yeah, the talking point is that Jimmy Carter used this as the Democratic president to get rid of 15,000 Iranians. Just saying that's the angle of the talking point.
It's a valid talking point.
Right. That's all I got. Thanks.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, the FBI has issued a warning saying that the FBI has found evidence showing at least 2 state election systems have been penetrated by hackers in recent weeks. And the FBI has issued warnings to all these election areas. You've got to tighten your security. We are detecting hackers are already breaking into the electronic voting machines. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because on the corporate media coverage of this story, they're saying the FBI found foreign hackers. That's not what the FBI said. They just said these election systems are being hacked. They didn't use foreigners. In fact, they don't have the information to know where the hacks came from. The corporate media is still out there pushing, this is all Russia. Russia's doing this. Russia's breaking in. So forth and so on. And it's kind of weird that this came out because, as you know, last week President Barack Obama came on out and said the idea that American elections are in any way not accurate and honest and trustworthy, that's just a wacky conspiracy theory. You guys, the idea that our elections are crooked. I mean, what's wrong with you people? Meanwhile, story coming on out here from SHTFplan.com. In the 2012 presidential elections, almost 2.8 million individuals were registered to vote in more than one state. And 1.8 million registered voters at the time of the election were actually dead. These figures came from the Pew Center on the States study entitled Inaccurate, Costly, and Inefficient Evidence that America's Voter Registration System Needs an Upgrade. They're describing it as glitches and errors. No, it isn't. It's fraud. This is the crookedest election in U.S. history. This election is so crooked they're having to screw those ballots into those ballot boxes. Now, as you know, Obama came on out in his attempt to reassure us that we can trust the results in November. Good luck on that one. Assigned the Department of Homeland Security to secure the election process and somehow make it proof from fraud. Okay? Here's where it gets interesting. Some of the key swing states are refusing. They're saying, we don't want you coming in and looking at, we have our own internal security people and we can absolutely assure you these elections are going to be honest and fair and we don't need you looking over our shoulder. So, and let's be honest, from Hillary's point of view, she can't win the White House without cheating. She couldn't win the nomination without cheating. Do you think she's all of a sudden going to develop some kind of traits of honesty and fairness and allow an honest election in November? Of course not. She's got enough money through that slush fund called the Clinton Foundation where she can buy her way to the White House, and that's exactly what she's going to do. And the only way we can stop her is to produce such an overwhelming landslide for Donald Trump that attempting to reverse it will be so obvious it'll trigger a revolution in this country. And I don't want to see that. But we do seem to be headed that way. This election is not about Hillary versus Trump. It's not about Republican versus Democrat or liberal versus conservative. It's about the establishment against we the people and who's actually in control of this country. This election is about a ruling narcocracy whose wealth and power traces back to the Iran-Contra scandal of the 1980s and all that cocaine money and corruption that resulted and lingers to this very day. They don't want to give that up. That's what this election is about. It's bringing this country back to law and order. It's about getting rid of corruption. It's about making America great again. So let's talk about the war zones here. Joe Biden, as you know, was over in Turkey trying to make nice with Erdogan and, kiss and make up after that failed coup. And Biden came on back and said, yeah, it's all going to work out. It's going to be fine. At which point Erdogan started bombing U.S.-supported terrorists in Syria, leaving Biden with a very, very red face, as he richly deserves. Now, Turkey is inside Syria. They're dropping bombs. They've killed at least 25. And the Syrian government is basically condemning this incursion into ISIS-held border areas and saying it's tantamount to a declaration of war. They're starting to use that W word. Turkey's invasion of Syria, for whatever reason they want to put out in the public, it amounts to an act of war. So's the U.S. incursion. The U.S. doesn't have any business being inside Syria. So, now Erdogan has telephoned Vladimir Putin because Russia is apparently very angry at Turkey for sticking its nose into Syria. And so Erdogan said, I'm going to call my good friend Putin, we're going to sort this all out. And Putin did take the phone call, but based on comments coming out of the Kremlin, it was not very productive. And I have a feeling that Erdogan has grown a little too big for his britches in the eyes of Putin, and Putin basically slapped him down. But it's definitely a chaotic situation over there. All righty, we're going to be taking another commercial break here very soon. When we come on back, more information about Turkey and those nuclear weapons at Incirlik. That issue may be about to resolve itself. Not necessarily all good or all bad, but we'll talk about that when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So we're talking about the situation at Turkey's Incirlik Air Base, which has been under lockdown and a no-fly zone ever since the failed coup against Erdogan. And there was concern expressed for the 50 B-61 gravity nuclear bombs being stored there, just 70 miles from the Syrian border. And those bombs were put there to basically wag at Russia, to remind Russia that we can drop mushroom clouds on them whenever we want. And the concern was Erdogan was in a position to commandeer some of those weapons and thereby create a new nuclear power in the Middle East to rival Israel. Well, that problem appears to be winding down because Turkey is now indicating that they want not only the United States, but Great Britain's Royal Air Force off of that base. And they're asking the U.S. to remove the nuclear weapons, so that aspect is coming down. But behind it all, we're seeing indications that Turkey may be getting ready to leave NATO and pivot even further toward Russia. Now, Iran has had a little bit of an upset with the United States. Apparently, the U.S. sent in what was being described as a radar-evading unmanned aerial vehicle that tried to enter Iranian airspace from Afghanistan. It was immediately detected, and the Iranian army issued a warning that it was going to be shot down, and the U.S. left the area. So much for the theory that it's radar evading. Over in Yemen, there's been another explosion. It's being blamed on a suicide bombing. 60 dead. And somebody called up and said, we're ISIS, we did it, it's all our fault, come and get us, so forth and so on. Now, the Philippines is out there raising the stakes in the South China Sea, promising a bloody confrontation with China over that South China Sea. They're looking for any excuse to get this war going on behalf of their masters in the United States, which is really what it's all about. If you actually look at these islands in Google Earth, there just isn't all that much there. This is like when Great Britain went to war over the Falkland Islands, and most of what they were fighting over were sheep. But the real goal here is for the U.S. to get into a conflict with China in order to force the world to stop using that yuan and go back to using that U.S. dollar. Over in Israel, where apparently they thought we weren't paying attention, Israeli intelligence officers accompanied a bunch of extremist settlers in raiding the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is one of the major holy sites for Islam, and these settlers and these intelligence officers forced their way into the mosque. Nobody got hurt, but Netanyahu is clearly trying to start a war. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, you're going to have to use those 516 numbers I gave you in the first hour to call into the program because the 800 number is not working. Now, moving on here, over at the New York Times, they're aware that more and more people are turning to Russia Today and Sputnik News to find out what's really going on in the world. And the New York Times has come on out with this claim that the Kremlin is using Sputnik and Russia Today as disinformation weapons. Now, this is coming from the New York Times, which told us all Saddam had nuclear weapons, humans are warming the earth, vaccines are safe, GMOs are good for you, and Hillary Clinton is in perfect health. So there's panic time over there. So let's talk about the economic news. We aren't paying as much attention to it as we probably ought to. And we're seeing a story coming on out that apparently economists in Europe, in particular Joseph Stiglitz, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, is out there saying that this single currency experiment called the euro has in fact been a complete disaster. And he's saying as a result of this, there are whole areas of Europe that literally have endured a lost decade from the economic paralysis caused by that European Central Bank, which of course loans all those euros into circulation at interest. Now, Germany's Vice Chancellor has warned that the European Union may shatter because of the Brexit. And already over in Great Britain, the remainders are trying to figure out some way they can justify ignoring the will of the people. And unfortunately, the law is actually on their side. The referendum is an advisory vote only. Parliament can still say, no, we've decided what's best for us, meaning our wallets and our pocketbooks and our bank accounts, that we're going to keep the British people enslaved to that European Central Bank, which could trigger a revolt there as well. Now, as you know, here in the United States, President Obama is talking about sending the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership Treaty to Congress for ratification. There's only one small problem. It's actually failed. Germany's economic minister, Sigmar Gabriel, is saying these talks have failed. There's been no agreement here. And mostly the reason it's failed is because this TTIP was all about American demands on how Europe should run its economy. And what's been going on here is that as Bretton Woods faded away, as the petrodollar faded away, the U.S. government tried to use the TTIP and the TTP to sort of lock the current dollar hegemonic domination into international law. And that's failed. So, now you've been hearing talk in the media lately about whether or not Janet Yellen is going to raise rates. And of course, the stock traders want them to stay down. They have a lot of fun manipulating the market with that interest-free money. But Yellen is saying it's time to raise the rates. People are turning away from the dollar internationally because having it doesn't generate any return. However, former Congressman Bernie Frank, who was co-author of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act, which repealed Glass-Steagall, has called on the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low in order to help Hillary Clinton win the election in November. Because if the rates are raised, it will probably send us deeper into the recession. And the last word we're getting now from the Federal Reserve is they're going to go along with this. And so what we have here is a central bank that is not thinking in terms of what is best for the American economy. They're not thinking about what's best for the creation of new jobs and the starting of new industries and the repair of our infrastructure, the restoration of our manufacturing. They're thinking in terms of helping out the crony. Because if they do this to help Hillary, then obviously the Federal Reserve will get from Hillary whatever the Federal Reserve wants if she steals the White House. Now, you remember back when Donald Trump was out there saying that these central banks are going to be asking for more bailouts? Because right now, that's the only thing holding them up. Every economy, healthy economy, is founded on the ability of ordinary people to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries and pump that wealth into the bottom of the economy. That has now vanished pretty much from the United States and many other countries. And the economic activity now consists of those at the very top looting those underneath them. And when Donald Trump came on out and said there's going to be another bailout, of course they said, oh, it's ridiculous, it's completely nonsense. You know, he's just fear-mongering here to try and win the White House. Well, it turns out Trump was right, because central bankers in charge of the vast bulk of the world's economy have just had a 3-day conference. And the net result of that conference was yet another demand for governments to have a stimulus spending package. Make up lots and lots of new money and shower it all over us bankers, and we'll stimulate the economy. They never have. They just write themselves huge bonus checks. Stick it in their pockets. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. And we're continuing with the economy in this hour. And we're going to talk about Obamacare, because Obamacare exchange sign-ups have fallen far short of the forecasts. That's been a feature of Obamacare right from the very beginning. We're going to sign up all these millions and millions of people, and they get 2. And once again, the sign-ups are falling far short of the forecast. These health insurance policies are hideously expensive. The deductibles are sky high. Most people have done the math and realized that paying cash for their medical care is actually the lowest cost option. And they're just going to go ahead and accept that IRS penalty for not having an Obamacare compliant insurance package. Now, so many of these exchanges and health insurance companies have closed or bailed out of Obamacare for much of the United States of America. The American people don't have a choice anymore. There's only one Obamacare provider available to them. That's a monopoly. And that means that provider can jack up the prices and the deductibles even more. There are now some portions of the United States of America where Obamacare-compliant policies are simply not available anymore. It's been a losing proposition. Obamacare is a disaster. It has failed in its overt purpose of making health care affordable for Americans, and it's failed in its covert purpose of enriching the health insurance companies, who would then give the U.S. government a mafia-like piece of the action in the form of taxes. And it's completely failed. That's why Obama's getting ready to hit you with a carbon tax. He doesn't care what the name is anymore. His agenda, the entire government's agenda, is we got to take more money away from the American people. And that fails because we don't have any left. And nobody inside the Beltway, nobody's caught up in that groupthink, wants to mention that little inconvenient fact. After all these years of massive unemployment, wages and salaries being driven down to minimum wage levels, people losing high-paying jobs and having to take low-paying jobs, there is no more money out here. And they're living in a dream world. That's why the Christmas stuff is already going up in the shopping malls. It's another desperate grab for more of your money. Now, over at the official website for Obamacare, not the sign-in website, but associated with it. Remember when Obama was out there saying, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, and that was a big slogan that they had? Well, they've now deleted it from the official site. It's no longer operative. No, you may not keep your doctor. And apparently there was a really ugly incident where there was this Catholic-run hospital, and one of their patients who had to go to that hospital because it was within the network of her plan, was the only hospital she was allowed to go to. She had an IUD that slipped out of position, started basically puncturing the plumbing down there, and she was in horrible, horrible pain. And the Catholic hospital refused to treat her because of the fact that it was birth control and a sin. Just go ahead and deal with the pain. That's your reward for being a sinner and having an IUD. And it took this woman apparently quite a few days to change programs to find a hospital that would actually help her with this. So what we have here is a government-enforced monopoly for your health insurance, hospitals that won't treat patients because of the imaginary playmate in the sky. This is a wonderful medical system we have, isn't it? And if Obama's worried about his legacy, what history is going to remember about him, this will be a big part of it. The absolute disaster that was Obamacare. People don't have the money to pay for it. People are foregoing necessary medical care because they just can't afford it with those deductibles. And so now we have the doctors and hospitals saying they need bailouts because their business has dropped off. It sort of reminds me of the wisdom of one of the founding fathers who said, that government governs best which governs least. I think that was Thomas Jefferson. I could be wrong on that. It doesn't really matter. It's absolutely true. When government minds its own business and allows the people to take care of themselves, you have a strong, healthy, prosperous nation. When you have a government that insists on tinkering with absolutely every part of your life, things don't go very well. They're talking now about prosecuting vegetarian parents who want to raise their children as vegetarian. Oh, that's child endangerment. You've got to feed them a Big Mac right now or you're going to go to jail. Another article that came out of Zero Hedge. We are at a point where the encroachment of government power has historically resulted in rebellion. And I am alarmed at how much I am seeing articles with this tone showing up all over the independent media. People openly talking about rebellion, revolution, uprising. And I am still convinced that the ultimate fate of the United States federal government is to follow the former Soviet Union into the dustbin of history, and for very much the same reasons, the accumulation of lies, corruption. All right, so let's talk about immigration. Let's see. We have a phone call. Patrick in England. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Hello again, Mike. I've spoken to you for absolutely ages. Yes, I still listen when I can. Yeah, just really talking about the European Union and the Brexit vote that we had. Now, as probably most people know, that this referendum, which the government was really kind of forced into it in the same way that the Labour government were put under obligation way back in 1975 to provide the referendum as a carrot to being voted for, it's backfired on the government. They didn't expect to lose it. Now, what they do with all these referendums, they send all this correspondence around to every house. Every house in England has got this booklet here. HM is all official. It's got the royal coat of arms. HM government. Why the government believes that voting to remain in the European Union is the best decision for the UK. And here is all the rhetoric, and it's all patriotic and stuff. And why? Now, I believe that they've kind of they've shot themselves in the foot, but they're going to have to do this because they didn't expect to lose, which is why George Osborne didn't have a backup plan following the vote. It says in this book that very clearly at the end, a once-in-a-generation decision. It says here, the referendum on Thursday, 23rd of June, is your chance to decide if you should remain or leave the European Union. Blah, blah, blah. The government believes it is in the best interest of the UK to remain in the Union. Then it goes on. Then it says here again, this is your decision. the government will implement what you decide.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on. So they made a contract. They've made a contract, and they made it advisory, and I believe they're going to do what they can to try and drag it out into the long grass.
Well, here's a problem. Here's a problem. Okay, a public statement is not enforceable as a contract. They can make all the promises they want, and as we have seen from not only British history but American history, anything the government says can be changed around 24 hours later, and we're just supposed to go along with that. The people who are still in favor of keeping the European Union together, they're globalists. They're on board with this new world order. They're personally profiting from the misery that the EU is bringing down on all these people. And, of course, they don't want to give up that power, that authority.
I think that it's going to be a very difficult one because there's a lot of people in the government that are going to, as Liam Fox, and there's a number of very hardcore MPs that are going to hold the government, to their word on this. And I think I hear what you say, and I think they're going to find it very difficult. All they can do is really delay it because it's a thorny subject. And you know what? If you go back onto YouTube, you can find all the same arguments. Way back in 1975, we had a referendum as well, and they were using the same tactics back then of fear and if we left and so on and so forth. And it's funny how the whole campaign was run on exactly the same basis. It was an uncanny. There was a canny sort of comparison between what happened back in 75 and what's happened now. But I just find all they can do is try and drag it out into the long grass and delay it. But there's people that are going to hold the government to this. And we could get out tomorrow. And when they say Brexit, what that really means to the hardcore people is we go back to pre-1973, not Brexit light, where we keep some bit and that bit and this bit. Of course, we were never in the single currency. Thank goodness, we still kept the pound, but obviously we've surrendered political sovereignty to Europe. But we've kept our own monetary system. So we're not in the euro, and neither is Denmark and Hungary and one or two. Yeah, Denmark and Hungary are not in the euro either. But yeah, they're going to find it very difficult to hold this thing together. Anyway, that's just my opinion. I must get off air now, and Olaha from England.
Well, thank you very much for that. And you're absolutely right. The Brexit campaign this year was a replay of 1975, and that's where they made their biggest strategic mistake because they went back to what worked in 1975, not realizing that the world of 2016 had a very different point of view of the people. And so what worked in 1975 wasn't going to work today. We're seeing that same recycling here in our American presidential campaign, where Hillary is out there trying to replay the big, scary Russian monster because that's what worked back in the 1950s and 1960s. But again, they don't appreciate how the population's perceptions have changed, and that's why it's not getting the traction. And I think the Brexit vote is a good reminder that we should keep in mind that despite all the corporate media fear-mongering and the government, and even, yes, the election rigging, the Brexit vote did prevail, and we can do the same thing with Donald Trump. So, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, speaking of that whole European immigration situation, because of recent developments in Turkey, which is pretty much putting an end to this idea where Turkey would have visa-free travel to Europe, even though it's not technically part of the EU. That deal where Erdogan was going to hold back the migrants in Turkey is now off. And it looks like there are literally going to be millions and millions of new refugees flooding into Europe from Turkey. And whether it's the economic predations of the ECB or the refugees, this looks like the EU is about to tear apart. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to our show, and grab your pen and pencil here because I'm going to read those phone numbers for you one more time if you want to call into the show. Vonage has apparently misplaced the 800 number for this, and maybe it's an accident, maybe somebody's playing games with us. There does seem to be a lot of that going on. But now that you have your pencil and paper, The numbers are area code 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, 512-716-1897. You can also call in on Skype, as some of our callers have done. We're getting word that there's some kind of an active shooter situation at the Los Angeles International Airport. It's just stuff that's erupting on social media, hasn't even made the corporate media yet, and we'll keep you appraised of that. Meanwhile, over in Norway, they're starting to build their wall, and it's going to be this fence along an open area where migrants are just pouring into Norway. And they're going to build this border wall to halt the flow of illegal immigrants pouring in from Russia. Now, it's kind of interesting because you have the open borders people here in the United States of America saying that the U.S. ought to be more like Europe with this open border, everybody going everywhere. But if you need to remember, the European Union, open borders meant people within Europe could go over the European borders. It didn't mean opening up the outer borders to everybody else coming on in. And Norway's starting to build a wall. So have a lot of those countries started to build walls. But Trump's wall is bad. That's a bad thing here. Okay, the phone lines are starting to load on up here. We're going to start with Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hillary's got pickles, Huma's got wieners, and some of Europe is a bunch of turkeys.
Boy, that just about sums it up. I can quit the rest of the show for the day. That's it. Okay, that's wonderful.
Hey, Mike, this Vonage problem you got, I noticed RT has been having a lot of problems lately. So this is not isolated.
No, it isn't. We know that Hillary has these cyber warriors that are out there. They're hitting my server on an almost continual basis right now, as if I didn't have enough to worry about trying to keep all this equipment working. And we know it's them because they specifically target the articles on my website that deal with Hillary Clinton. You know, they're not targeting ClimateGate. They're not targeting my article about atheism. They're not targeting my article about the Big Bang. It's always the epic of Clinton's mess, the Clinton dead body list, was Hillary spying. Those are the things they're trying to DOS to keep people from accessing those articles.
Yeah, it's amazing, though, how they're building the wall over there and they complain about it. It's just a big bait and switch and phony. Yeah, it's just sad, Mike. It's like, they have their paws in everything, these neoliberals, bankers, neocons, and it's just sad how they can just twist everything for their own benefit. You know,
well, that's what they do. Then they see that's what their job is. You know, the only sin is losing, is their mindset. And they're all basically looking to take care of their particular backers and their particular controllers and supporters and whoever's got the blackmail information on them. And nobody is really keeping an overview of what's good for the country as a whole. And that, of course, is a failure of the White House itself, because if there is one official in this country who's supposed to be keeping an overview of what's best for the nation as a whole, it's supposed to be whoever's sitting in that Oval Office. But unfortunately, when you've had an Oval Office occupied by people who gained that position because of CIA drug smuggling and profiteering, they may be great CIA drug smugglers and money launderers, but they're not really very capable administrators and managers.
I wanted to switch topics. I just want to say condolences to Gene Wilder's family. Silver Streak and Willy Wonka and Star Crazy is some of my favorite movies, Mike.
Young Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein and the See No Evil, Hear No Evil series.
And he did, despite his professional success, he dealt with so much tragedy in his life. As you know, he married Gilda Radner off the original Saturday Night Live, and then she had a very long, prolonged illness and everything. So, it is kind of sad. Dustin, do you want to stay over the commercial break, or are you done?
I'm done. I just want to say that Gilda Radner was a great actress also.
Yeah, she absolutely was. All right, Dustin, we're going to let you go. We're going to take a break. We've got more callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America, and do not call 800-313-9443. It will not work. The correct numbers are 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, and 512-716-1897, and you might want to save that paper for future reference. Okay, let's go back to the phone calls here. Alex in San Antonio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex, are you there?
Hello, Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What is on your mind?
Mike?
Yes. You're on the air. Well, what do you want to talk about? Okay, I guess we just lost Alex. Let's switch over to Scott in Norfolk. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I had a quick question for you. As far as globalism versus nationalism, my understanding is that these globalists are working towards a global government. Isn't that a form of nationalism by pretty much folding nation states into one national government for the globe?
Well, I guess you could make the case that it is, but the real argument is whether there should just be one single government ruling the entire planet with all the obvious attendant corruption, or if the human race would be better served by a planet with 1,000 small nations all over it, each taking care of themselves. And I definitely favor the latter approach. When you look at how corrupt the American government has become, and then you have this idea of a global government, it'll only be worse. And because so much of the push for a global government is based on fraud and deception, we already know that this global government will not recognize a right to freedom of speech or expression, and they'll just be, it'll have to be history's worst tyranny merely to survive the circumstances of its own creation.
For a global government of any kind. The reason I ask is I'm halfway through a book by Zbigniew Brzezinski, The Grand Chessboard, and I'm reading this book because a lot of diplomats read this book, and he's had a lot of influence on Obama. And in his book, he seems at one hand to put down nationalism when it concerns European nations. He never puts down nationalism when it comes to the United States, right?
Well, from his perspective, he sees the United States as being sort of the midwife leading into that global government. Of course, at some point, the U.S. would have to be destroyed as well, but this push toward a global government right now is being enforced primarily with American weapons of war.
But as he's being very critical of any national movements, he's pushing for the European Union to become a political union and then inevitably become a nation state.
Well,
basically, and it's a really a contradiction. And when you're reading his book, the one thing that got me, I'm 85 pages into this book, it's about a 200-page book, is that it was on page 58 that he even makes mention of our financial system, the World Bank and IMF. He makes no mention of the Federal Reserve or the private central banking system. And what gets me is a lot of diplomats read this, and he's not even acknowledging what the true power is behind a lot of these nation states, which is the people who make money, who create money. It seems like a white elephant.
That's because Brzezinski understands that most people looking at the private central banks understand they're the cause of the mass poverty and debt slavery of humanity. And obviously, the New World Order global government people want to bring in a global private central bank to keep us all debt slaves and in our place for eternity. Now, Brzezinski's plan for Europe is only a stepping stone because they want to create a single sovereign group out of what's left of Europe. At the same time, they're talking about greater integration for Mexico, Canada, and the United States, which is the North American Union with a new name. And the idea being that somewhere down the road, there'll be a political merging of the North American Union and the European Union, and that this will basically open the door to start going on out and dragging the rest of the world into this single global government. Of course, the sticking points in this are Russia and China, who have no desire to be part of a global government. They have no desire to give up their national sovereignty and control. And that's why they're on the, one of the many reasons they're on the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list.
What's interesting is when you have people talk about globalism, especially merging these nation states in the EU, they always seem to think that the Civil War is some type of archaic thing in the past that can never happen again. And civil wars are some of the worst type of wars to have because it's very difficult to stop them. And if you merge all these nation states in Europe without really their real consent, a civil war is not only likely but probable.
I would agree. I would agree. We're on the verge of seeing open warfare breaking out between the traditional Europeans and all these instantly transported in refugees who've come in with this idea that they're going to be given the place for free.
It's just amazing. I think you're right. I think it's all about money. I think the arguments that they spout are just a smokescreen. It's about money. It's about control. They'll change their tune if they find something better that they can sell people, but they really don't care about the citizens.
No, we're all just livestock to them, human capital, whatever word you want to use, and they treat us like livestock. They tell us what food we must eat, what food we're not allowed to eat, what medicines we must take, what medicines we're not allowed to take. We really are being treated like farm animals, not like human beings deserving of respect. And we may not get that respect back, certainly will not get that respect back under our current government system. They've got this elitist attitude of, they're the elect because they're in Congress or the White House, and the rest of us should just shut up and do as we're told.
On a different subject with this election, could this be the first time that the GOP establishment and the DNC establishment, who are overseeing this electoral process coming up in November, both work together to deny Trump a victory?
Oh, we're already seeing it. We're already seeing. In fact, Fox News was running a story a little while ago about all these Republican groups getting up on college campuses and telling other Republicans, you can't let Trump into the White House. And they're still out there trying to sabotage him because, again, you have the Bush family is in control of the Republicans. The Clintons are in control of the Democrats. Both the Clintons and the Bushes go all the way back to that 1980s gun and drug running operation that became the Iran-Contra scandal. It's a narcocracy. It's a repeat of the same corruption that we saw during Prohibition, where those who were trafficking in the illicit substances had the money to literally buy their way to the highest levels of the U.S. government. That's where the Kennedy dynasty came from. Old Joe Kennedy was a rum runner. That was the source of the Kennedy's family fortune. And he put his kids into politics. John F. Kennedy became president. Robert F. Kennedy was on his way to being president. Teddy Kennedy probably would have run for president if it hadn't been for Chappaquiddick, which I have it from people who are on Martha's Vineyard was actually a third assassination attempt.
Jeez. Well, I tell you what, if they deny Trump his victory, and I believe that he's leading in the polls by a massive amount.
Yes.
By a massive amount. Then I think that'll lead to a revolution, will end Hillary's term.
I would tend to agree. I don't want to see one, but it is a credible threat that if Trump is cheated of the election or if he's assassinated, that could be the spark that really finally gets the American people into the streets and says, to heck with this. Anybody with a government job, just round them all up and put them in the gulags.
Because at that time, the public enough of us will be awake that we just can't go on anymore like that.
No, we can't. That other article we were talking about earlier, whenever government intrusion reaches this level, historically it's been a trigger for rebellion.
And hopefully, I know we're hoping for the Soviet model, the breakup model.
Yes.
And if that does happen, if we go the way of Soviet Union, then technically that would mean that some of our states would depart the Union, like some of the states in the Soviet Union departed. Many of the states departed that union, that political union.
We could see the United States balkanize. You'd have that northeastern power, elite, and wealth. You'd have the original Confederacy might just decide to go back to being their own country. We've been talking about the Western States Coalition that's been talking about breaking off and being their own country, going all the way back to when our national debt was only $6 trillion.
And what would happen to that national debt if we did go that way?
Under the international principle of odious debt, most of that would be written off and not be the responsibility of the people. And they're trying to figure out some way around that, because the whole scam by government and the bankers is manufacture a debt, convince the people that they are responsible for it, and loot them thereby.
Well, if we're looking at that model, you may want to move back here pretty soon. You might become a Hawaiian national citizen.
Worse things could happen. Claire and I would like to move back to the mainland. It would make it easier for me to go to all of these different conferences I'm invited to. Claire could find better singers for her demo. Hawaii has a rich music tradition, but it's all 1x5, pearly shells and tiny bubbles, and she longs to find some really good choirs that she could throw her music at. And the main reason we'd like to get off this rock is because if the U.S. really does start a real war with China and Russia, we're going to have a mushroom cloud about 2.5 miles out that window. And that is just going to be a real drag on everybody.
No, you get some good waves out of it.
Yeah. I'll get a permanent tan.
Well, thanks a lot, Michael, and thanks for the great job you're doing.
All right, well, thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to switch back over to Alex in San Antonio. I guess we got our phone issues fixed. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. I was calling because I was trying to piece a couple of things together here, given some of these investments that have been made in the past, I'd say, month and a half. I was wondering, did you ever get a chance to see a video by this developer / hacker, Jacob Applebaum, speaking to Europarl, the Europarliament in regards to the PRISM and the other, I guess, surveillance tactics used by the, I guess you could say, by the intelligence agencies. In which he was talking about how they were trying to militarize a part of it, of the internet, and drive and keep everyone in that part, just like the media kept, I guess, the Western society in a certain paradigm, and that these same people, this cartel, space cartel, I guess you could say, that have control over the comms and the satellites. These people who are doing this thing, they're I guess you could say malevolent forces that hid behind W. Bush, and then there's the benevolent forces that are hiding behind Trump, and that they're breaking down pieces of the paradigm, letting it fall piece by piece, so as to avoid the mass panic and mass calamity that would happen, because of all the normalcy bias and cognitive dissonance around in this society. So the reason I'm touching up on this is because we're coming to an end of, like, literally there's no more road. I invest in gold and silver and Forex, and that's how I've been kind of I guess my livelihood for the past 10 years. And I'm just looking at this thing, and I'm just, there's nowhere to go, like nowhere. No one's buying anything. I mean, they're going to have to raise interest rates, and that'll be the end. I mean, that's it. It's the end.
Well, you can simplify this down a little bit here when you understand that all private central banks are essentially pyramid schemes or Ponzi schemes, because when you have that debt-based currency out there, the only way the system can perpetuate is you have to find larger and larger pools of borrowers to allow the creation of new money, part of which is siphoned off to pay the interest on the old money. But the debt grows faster than the money supply, so you can never pay it all off, and eventually you reach a point where the debt is crushing the whole society. They can't find new borrowers, and we're at that point right now, which is why they're now coming out with this idea of bailouts, where they're just creating the money out of thin air. Technically, it's a loan to the American people, and they're giving it to Wall Street to keep things looking good.
Yeah, Mike, but that's only if you stay in the legacy system. If you shift to the new crypto system, and it's more of a peer-to-peer thing, more of a blockchain thing, and this is a system where classes and societies and cultures, and not just nations and states, can compete for currency.
Well, it doesn't matter the technology by which it's spread. What really comes down to this idea is if the money is loaned into circulation at interest,
right,
it's a pyramid scheme. If the money is spent into circulation by the issuing government, then you have a currency that's serving the government and the American people rather than the private bankers. And it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's cryptocurrency or gold coins or shiny little white stones you pick up on the beach. The difference is whether the government issues the currency to buy what the government needs and then taxes back at the same amount, or you have a private central bank that has arrogated the money creation authority and issues all the public currency at interest. The difference is the public currency being managed as a public utility, or is it being managed as a for-profit operation by the bankers, who are literally making up this fairy dust money out of thin air, loaning it out, thereby chaining you, committing you to work and labor to pay that interest back on that make-believe money?
No, I mean, that when it comes down to it, in all practicality, you're 100% correct. But what I think is happening is people are starting to become conscious of what is actually bringing that control about, which is how does, because there's a string and then there's someone else at the end of that string, and truthfully, the arm that's just moving the string is just the arm, but the head is the thing that's controlling the arm. And what we have to pay attention to is how these things are being done, because
what it comes down to, I'm sorry to cut you off, we're going to take a commercial break here. What it comes down to is the money supply being managed by the nation and its people, or is it being managed by the private central bankers? And that's it in a nutshell. Alex, we got to let you go. Take a break for commercial. We got other callers waiting on the line when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take another phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, young man. I have a thought for you regarding the thing about having borders and not having borders, or a wall or whatever, regarding immigration and so forth, and the North American Union. I got into a conversation last holiday season regarding the aspect of borders and people immigrating and so forth ad nauseum with someone I know. The skinny of it was this. In some folks' mind already, they are already Americans. And thus, they should be able to come into the U.S. as they wish. And I got into a discussion with them. I said, how can you say that they're Americans when they come from Mexico or from Canada? Mind you, in Canada at the border, you have to go through a lot of IDing and so forth, because I've been there.
Yes, me too.
However, I said, well, they are part of America. And I thought, no, they're Mexico. And it dawned on me what they were saying. The North American Union is already here because on the North American continent you have the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the reason why they're using the mentality of logic that this is the North American continent, thus they are Americans, even though they're in Mexico and not the U.S. So as a result, they are Americans as a result of that.
Okay. All right. You can basically say, all right, they're North Americans. Okay, but they're not citizens of the United States.
Well, that's the thing about trying to tongue twist yourself and trying to get the logic across their train of thought like that. But to them, you're going right back into an eternal loop of terminology.
Well, again, this is about legality. This nation has declared borders, and it is illegal for you to walk across the borders into this country because you'll be treated like a criminal. Now, if you want a fair and equitable immigration policy, and this is a good way to shut these people up, say if you want a fair and equitable immigration policy, let's just have exactly the same one that Mexico does. Because you can't walk down to Texas and step across the border into Mexico, they'll throw you in jail. Okay? So, it just... but again, this idea of a one-world government, look how corrupt the government of the United States of America has become, and then multiply that by the entire planet being subservient to that government. I mean, all of these world leaders around there, they dream of a single global government and a golden throne of planet Earth, and they all want their rear ends sitting on that cushion.
But, Michael, you just now nailed one probable issue that's the problem with that. You know what that is?
What is that?
The so-called one world government is supposed to be originating in Israel.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
Is it not?
And Israel's definitely on board of this one world government because they want to be its capital.
So they cannot sit in the U.S. as the one world government as far as the government is concerned.
Well, the U.S. won't be...
They have to move to Israel in order to do it.
Well, they won't hesitate to do that, just like, you know, all these people going to New York to be part of the United Nations. But it's going to be a big question as to, you know, who's going to sit in that chair. All right, we got to let you go. Take a break.
Have a good one.
Thanks. Going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, the 800 number is not working. The phone numbers to call into the show are 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, and 512-716-1897. Now, turning back to this issue of immigration. Remember, not too long ago, Angela Merkel came out with this campaign, if you will, to encourage Germany's companies to be hiring the refugees ahead of German citizens who were looking for work. And it caused a huge outcry among German citizens who wanted those jobs. And as it turned out, only 54 refugees got hired anyway. Out of 1 million refugees that have poured into Germany, which means 900,000 are living off the taxpayers. Merkel's approval is sliding. Half of Germans are against her serving a fourth term. In fact, I would say that's probably a very optimistic number. In fact, right now over in the Czech Republic, Putin is more popular than Angela Merkel. Everybody's fed up with this whole global government, new world order, no borders nonsense. Now, we've been talking about the Austrian elections. They're having their second runoff. The first one was voided because of election fraud, which is amazing because Barack Obama says election fraud. That's just a conspiracy theory. But Freedom Party candidate Norbert Hofer has extended his lead in new polls heading into the Austrian presidential rerun. And so we may start seeing talk about an Auxit. Austria may decide that they're going to leave the EU. Now, let's talk about President Obama's, well, they're calling President Obama's hometown of Chicago. It isn't. Honolulu is. But it's an article pointing out how in this last weekend alone, over in Chicago, which is held up as the model of gun control legislation by the gun grabbers, over this last weekend, 40 people have been shot, 9 killed. Because when you take guns away from the law-abiding citizens, the criminals will have the guns, and they'll know that they can go on out and commit whatever mayhem they want, safe from anyone shooting back at them. And they already know the cops aren't going to show up. Average response time for a 911 call in this country runs anywhere between 8 and 17 minutes, depending upon where in the country you live. More than enough time for the criminals to do what they're going to do and skedaddle, which is why so many crimes remain unsolved. Somebody ran a study once and said that if you walked into a convenience store in a part of town you normally did not go to and you held it up, there was only a 1 in 33 chance the police would ever even talk to you, let alone arrest you or charge you. It's open season on law-abiding American citizens. Whether it's street crime, cyber crime, toxic food, toxic drugs. Now, Julian Assange is celebrating a bit of a victory. The United Nations had a panel studying his enforced stay at the Ecuadorian embassy. and they concluded it represented arbitrary detention. In other words, he's effectively in prison without having been convicted of any crime. And the United Nations is recommending he be allowed to go free wherever he wants to go. The United States is absolutely saying, no, this man was a threat to our national security. Actually, Assange is simply putting out there the facts about what this government is doing for the public edification. Julian Assange, or for that matter, Edward Snowden, were doing the job the corporate media pretends to do but never does. Britain has announced they will defy the United Nations, that if Julian Assange sets foot outside the Ecuadorian embassy, they will arrest him and send him to the United States of America for whatever horror the United States wants to use to make an example of this guy. You don't tell the truth about the U.S. government. When you live in a government, when you live under a government that lies to you, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's heresy. I tell you, it's heresy. Along the same lines, remember this website that was set up, DC Leaks, and it was set up by the group that hacked into George Soros' Open Society Foundation. They had 2,500 internal documents, and they put them out on the website that basically showed the extent to which George Soros is playing God with planet Earth and the human race by virtue of his having so much money. He thinks that gives him the right to be controlling the world, even though he is not elected. He does not represent ordinary people. He just has a lot of money, and he feels it gives him the right to tinker with other people's lives, other people's nations. Well, the DC Leaks website has been taken down now, and Twitter suspended their account. Apparently, George Soros called up and said, they're saying bad things about me, and if you want me to not sell my investments in your companies, you will take them down. One of the leaked documents that came on out from the Soros organization was a plan to regulate the Internet to favor the Open Society supporters. In other words, Soros is pursuing an agenda of finding ways to silence anybody who thinks a global government New World Order might not be a wonderful idea. I suppose I'm on that list as well. All right, let's take, first of all, we got to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And a quick reminder, if you want to call on in, the toll-free number is not working today, so you want to call 512-716-1603. 512-716-1883, 512-716-1897. We're going to take a phone call. Mike in Tennessee, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello.
Hello.
Mike?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes, this is, I was calling because I see that Israel controls this country. We are Israel. We're fighting against all Israel's enemies. And it's the same old. It's always the illegal immigrant. It's always the freaking other party, but it's never Israel. It never.
Well, we know that our current U.S. government is a puppet ruler. They're ruling the United States for the benefit of Israel. We see it when we have Steny Hoyer coming on out and saying Donald Trump as president would be bad for Israel. Who cares if it's bad for Israel? The question is a Donald Trump presidency going to be good for the United States of America? And I am sick to death of all these Israel firsters. No government can serve two masters, and a government that serves Israel cannot, does not, and will not serve the United States of America. And right now we need leaders who are going to put America first, second, and third. And you have the ADL coming on out and calling Donald Trump an anti-Semite for wanting to put America first. I mean, that really is just displaying the extent to which our government has been subverted by this foreign power. And it's time for it to end.
I think that if we're ever to take our country back, that needs to be number one on the agenda.
I agree.
That we are no longer a puppet of Israel, and we will no longer have a centralized bank. Period.
I would agree.
We'll worry about illegal
if,
immigration later, but at this point we're occupied.
Yes, we are. And you see the people of Iraq don't like living under puppet rule. The people of Afghanistan don't like living under puppet rule. The people of Yemen don't like living under puppet rule. Why should we be any more accepting of it? If we can get Trump into the White House, I think we ought to take one of these big, giant cargo ships that's lying empty and unused right now because of the economic downturn, and let's grab all these Israel firsters all over the country and all the motion picture studios and the state houses and the media and just throw them all in there and just sail it for Tel Aviv and say, look, they're your problem now.
That's right. But, Mike, I have to be honest with you. I don't hear Trump saying that. I heard Trump address, what is it? What's the organization for Israel that all the people, all the candidates
AIPAC.
address?
Okay, Alex, first of all, I get a lot of this. Trump is running for president, and he's got to try and not offend the people who've got the money and control over the media. Not that I think he should worry, because the media has already demonstrated they're dead set against him. But if you look at the Israeli media and Steny Hoyer, it's very obvious Israel does not feel Donald Trump is going to be working for them, regardless of what perception you may be taking from the speech he made to AIPAC. They want Hillary Clinton. There's no question about that. Anyway, listen, thank you for the phone. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and get on back to the news here. The people keep trying to come on out and say, "Oh, Donald Trump's a servant of Israel." Well, like Hillary isn't. So it's a no, okay? They're both making the noises pandering to Israel. Let's get back to all the reasons we have to vote against Hillary Clinton. The corruption, okay, and, we still have Mike in Tennessee. Apparently we got a confusion on our lines. Mike, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're on the air. You're on the air.
Thank you. You may have heard of a thing called the Jay Treaty back in the late 1700s, and that is where they established the border between Canada and the United States. And in the Jay Treaty, all Native Americans are exempt, and they are free to travel across border anytime, whenever, wherever, without the government can't stop them. They can basically show a status card which shows that you're a Native American, and you just walk on through.
Well, certainly with regards to the migration patterns of the Great Plain Indians, that makes a lot of sense because they had to survive by following the herds of bison, and bison don't stop at the national border.
Well, it had nothing to do with following herds. It had to do with the inherent God-given right to go where the hell you wanted to.
I think...
Remember, we weren't slaves. We were not subjects to a king or a ruler. We didn't sign...
Hold it. I think you're reading more into it than is actually there. Nations have a right to borders. Nations have had borders going back thousands and thousands of years. Villages had fences. And it's all about protecting your nation and what you have built to make sure that your children inherit the work product that you spent your life building, and not let it be plundered and looted by other people. Mike, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Going to get deluged by all these New World Order, no borders people. In my mind, national borders serve the same purpose for planet Earth that fireproof doors do in a building and watertight bulkheads do in ships. It prevents an accident from destroying the entire structure. Now, you can prop open the fireproof doors in a building and lock open those hatches in the watertight bulkheads, and it may seem things are better because you can run around wherever you want to go. But the first fire or the first leak will sink the entire structure. It was the dropping of economic borders that allowed the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud to almost destroy Europe's economy. These borders are necessary things to preserve the system as a whole. And by the way, getting on back to the analogy about the building or the ship, there are places in those in buildings and ships that ordinary people shouldn't be allowed to go into, like the engine rooms or the furnace. This idea of no borders, I mean, look at the White House. They're building an even bigger fence than they had before. It's no borders for you, but lots of borders for them. Jean-Claude Juncker is up there saying borders are an old-fashioned idea. We don't need them anymore. Yet he himself lives inside a gated, fenced community. It's hypocrisy. What they want to do is turn all of humankind into a single massive humanity with no sense of self, no sense of identity. Because you're easier to control that way if you don't know who you are. That's why they're attacking our historical heritage, whether it's the Confederate flag or various other monuments. They're even trying to get us confused over what restroom we're going to use, so that we're so befuddled, we're easy to manipulate. And to heck with that stuff. All right, now then, let's talk about computers here. As you know, following the collapse of .com, the FBI took over many of their servers. And for a while, you just had a banner saying this server, this domain has been seized by the government. But apparently, megaupload.org is still out there and operating, and you can get porn and sex ads and malware. And it turns out it's still being run by the FBI for sting operations. Because sting operations, where you ensnare innocent people, is a lot easier than actually going out and finding real criminals here. Now, if you have an iPhone 6, you may be dealing with a problem. It's called touchscreen disease. And it turns out when the iPhone 6 first came out, a lot of people commented on how flimsy it was. And especially people who would put it in their pocket would find that the phone was flexing and deforming. And apparently over time, the microsolder joints on the motherboard holding that touchscreen controller start to fail. And the factory authorized companies are not allowed to replace it, or to repair it. You have to buy a whole new motherboard or actually a whole new phone. And a lot of people are commenting that it just seems rather more than a coincidence that all of these iPhone 6 touchscreens are starting to fail just as Apple is about to launch a new iPhone. Remember what I said before about planned obsolescence? Where they design this stuff to fail after a few years, so you always have to be buying new ones. Like after today's show, I got to go buy a couple new monitors. These are not that old. I remember I went into the Best Buy store a while back complaining about another piece of equipment that had failed too soon. Oh, you should have bought the extended service warranty. The extended service warranty still means I got to unplug everything and bring it back in and swap it on out. What I want and what I'm willing to pay for is something that's going to do the work I need it to do for year on end without problem. But that doesn't fit the current financial model. And I told this salesperson, I said, these things need to be built to last longer. And he said, oh, well, they can't. It's just not possible. And I said, don't be ridiculous. I have a Commodore VIC-20 from 1983 that still works perfectly. And the sales clerk huffed up and said, well, you can't do anywhere near as much on that as you can on this modern equipment. And I handed this dead piece of equipment to the salesman. I say, I dare you to do something on that right now. These sales clerks are all brainwashed in the religion of planned obsolescence. We don't build things to fix. You're supposed to just buy a new one every once in a while, which doesn't work when you have an economy that's in the trouble this one's in. I've seen some of the ads for the kids going back to school. They're literally now trying to push parents to buy a whole new laptop for each new school year. They're not even talking about buying one in their freshman year and having it last through high school graduation. They're just churning and churning and churning. Now, apparently down in Florida, House District 86, Laurel Bennett was shocked when she saw the local NBC affiliate reporting she had lost her race. The problem being the election hasn't actually been held yet. And I guess NBC's attitude is, why bother with the elections? We'll just skip ahead to the results. We already know what the results are going to be. Our people will be in. Your people will be left unemployed. We're just trying to save money and time here. We're going to cancel the November 8 election. It's going to be Hillary Clinton. Just get used to that idea right now. Now, apparently, debris from the missing Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 was found off the coast of Mozambique. Interestingly enough, this debris is seriously mangled. And analysts looking at it are saying this isn't from the crash. This indicates the airplane exploded. Now remember, there were witnesses who reported seeing this plane shot down in a military training exercise, a joint mission between the U.S. and the Thai navies. And it's not like the U.S. military has not accidentally shot down passenger jets before. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you know, drug addiction in this country is a major, major problem. And it doesn't help when you have the CIA bringing the stuff over the border, whether it was heroin during Vietnam or cocaine during Iran-Contra or more heroin coming in from Afghanistan. But along with the illegal drug dealers making a huge amount of money, the regular pharmaceutical companies make a tidy profit off of people who are trying to quit prescription opioids. And there is an interesting little story here. This came out of Oraz.com about this gentleman who had a decade-long addiction to prescription opioid painkillers. And it got completely out of control. But the man finally managed to quit his addiction, and he's filed a legal battle with the medical industry over just who was the victim here. Because whether you're getting opium from the guy standing under the streetlight on the corner or from that spanky, shiny, clean, white pharmaceutical company, it's still addictive. And the fact that the doctor is writing you a prescription for an addictive substance doesn't make it any less addictive. And prescription medical abuse is a big problem, but it doesn't get reported on. From the corporate media's perspective, the drug abuse problem is solely the street drugs, because after all, if the doctor says it's okay, you can have this. And so we know that certain medications are overprescribed. We know that medications are prescribed to boost profits. We know that doctors own stock in the pharmaceutical companies whose medications they prescribe. We know that the pharmaceutical industries provide all kinds of inducements to doctors who will prescribe their medications. Trips to conferences, all kinds of little gifts. And it's another corrupted influence. It's the medical industrial complex. Most Americans who are on prescription medications usually have 5 or more different bottles in their medicine cabinets. And you know how expensive that stuff is. The FDA is now taking the position that doctors who prescribe a healthy diet to patients are now basically justifying the declaration that vegetables are now medicine and should be under FDA control. So the FDA is going to come on in and start regulating the content of vitamin B in kernels of corn or some such nonsense as that. It's just a grab for more authority, more power, and certainly more funding for all this nonsense. Now here's another story. This was a survey published in Pediatrics, and it reports 87% of pediatricians in the United States say they've encountered parents who are refusing to vaccinate their children in 2013. A decade earlier, it was 75%, so it's actually going up. The most common reasons parents give, the vaccines aren't necessary. And they're saying if the diseases aren't around, why bother vaccinating for them? Plus, we know that some of these vaccines are very harmful. We know that when these mandatory childhood vaccines get mixed together and administered in a single shot, it can trigger high fever and autism and brain damage. Vaccines are a $29 billion a year industry, and it's all about sales, pushing sales, pushing sales. And any harm that they cause, well, the kid died from shaken baby syndrome. We're going to throw the parents in prison. And it shows just how heartless and cruel and utterly ruthless the so-called medical industry has become. Because it's all about profitability and not what's best for the patient. The Hippocratic principle of, first of all, do no harm has just gone away. They need to cause harm. The whole medical industrial complex collapses if America becomes healthy. Now, there's nobody who sat in a dark room someplace and said, we need to make America sick to sell more medications. It's an epiphenomenon of the way the business is run, but the end result is still the same. They need Americans to be chronically ill to make money. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, if you'd like to call us in for this, call in for the last half hour, it's 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, 512-716-1897. All right. Now then, we're continuing to see all this talk about the EpiPen and how much the price was raised, and the CEO got a huge, huge increase in salary. The exact same medication administered by a doctor through a traditional hypodermic costs $3.50. It's about gouging. I think what's going on here is Wall Street and the heads of these corporations understand this economy isn't going to last much longer. And so the mindset is grab what you can, as much as you can, get it out of the country and hidden before it all comes apart. Because this kind of behavior, this kind of gouging, wouldn't be tolerated in an earlier age. Now everybody's doing it. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation, and that's where we are. Now, if you are my age, and if you are, you have my deepest sympathies, you probably remember the controversy over water fluoridation, which was supposedly done to fight tooth decay. And it was also a very handy way of getting rid of the accumulated fluoride waste left over from uranium enrichment, because the feedstock for those uranium centrifuges is uranium hexafluoride. It's very, very corrosive. That's what Teflon was invented to deal with, was to line the centrifuges to keep them from corroding. But it left over this huge pile of very toxic fluoride waste, so they diluted it, said it's good for tooth decay, and sold it to the masses. Now, topically applied fluoride, in other words, when you go in to the dentist office and they give you a fluoride treatment, yes, that does have a provable impact on delaying tooth decay. There's never been any evidence that simply drinking it in your water was going to have any impact on tooth decay at all. What drinking fluoride in water does do, it's a very mild tranquilizer. Keeps you calm, keeps you relaxed and mellow while the government abuses you and slaps you upside of their head. But more and more people are beginning to realize there are some serious side effects of fluoride toxicity. And there's a new study from Ohio's Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine that has found a connection between water fluoridation and a rise in diabetes in the United States between 2005 and 2010. Too many of these ideas get put on out there on the basis of a soundbite. We're going to fluoridate the water, and anybody who says they shouldn't, they're a wild-eyed, kooky conspiracy theory. In fact, Hollywood was out there supporting that whole agenda. In the movie Our Man Flint with James Coburn, who's a very nice gentleman, made fun of people who were concerned about water fluoridation, and of course it was a big story element in Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, where General Jack D. Ripper starts going on about purity of water, and they're putting things in our water. And people were justly concerned, and in hindsight, they had a right to be concerned about what was in the water. Today, of course, compared to what's coming out of the faucets in places like Flint, Michigan, the fluoride is the least of your worries. But there's an epic failure of the government right there to be taking care of the needs of the American people when you can't turn on a tap and get safe drinking water out of it. When I was a kid, you could drink water out of a garden hose, not worry about it. The attitude today is you have no right to safe, clean drinking water. Buy it in bottles from the corporation. We're privatizing your water. Next it'll be the air. They'll crank up the air pollution so you can't breathe, and then you'll have to buy filtered clean air from some large corporation. Didn't pay your air bill this month, we're going to suffocate you in your house. Total dependency for the necessities of life is total slavery. If you really think about it, what life in any slave culture is like. Do what you're told, we'll give you water. Do what you're told, we'll give you food. If you're particularly obedient, we may give you nicer clothes. So let's talk about human-caused global warming, because as you know, NASA came out saying July is the hottest year we've ever had on record. And nobody's listening to NASA any longer. Most of its funding is now literally to support human-caused global warming agenda. And they've been caught lying, so has NOAA. The Old Farmer's Almanac, which to me is much more trustworthy than the United States government or NASA or NOAA. And I've worked for NASA, so I know where I'm coming from on this one, is predicting a very early, very hard winter. And as a matter of fact, snow is already starting to fall in many places in the northern hemisphere. Pikes Peak, Colorado, the mountains above San Francisco are starting to show snow. Calgary, which normally August is a hot and humid month, they're getting snow. Snow in northern Europe, they're opening up the ski resorts early. It's just another big scare by the government. Create a problem and offer to sell a solution. That's how government operates. It creates problems in order to sell you a solution in exchange for your money and your obedience. That's how they work. The government isn't really running our society. They're a parasite. Despite this report of early snow, despite the several record-setting winters we've had in a row, we are seeing a report that when Barack Obama goes to China, he will ratify the Paris Climate Accord himself all on his own, which under the Constitution, he's not allowed to do that. The Senate has to ratify all treaties. But Obama's going to say, well, I'm outside the United States right now. I don't have to play by the rules. I'll just go ahead and ratify this myself. Now, right now, people are talking about all the horrible flooding that took place down in Louisiana. We know in at least one case the flooding was actually worsened by a deliberate decision to put a concrete barrier down the middle of a highway that prevented the water from draining away from one of the towns. The mayor is suing the state and federal government, saying he's been screaming about this for 3 years, that this was going to be a problem. We know there's another depression heading into the East Coast. We've got 2 hurricanes aimed at us right here. These things are going to happen. But is it really the hurricane, or is it government misjudgments causing the problems? There's a very interesting story that came out of Brass Check TV, where some firemen, first responders back on Hurricane Katrina have now gone public saying they were told not to say on the media what they were actually seeing about Katrina. Because what they were seeing were the failure of all these levees that collapsed. These levees that were supposed to protect New Orleans from flooding were collapsing all over the place, and they were ordered not to tell what they saw when they appeared before a congressional committee hearing about the devastation. Now, the reason for that was not included in this original story, but I'm going to share that with you. Now, I spent a little bit of time on the Mississippi myself on a riverboat, and I got to see the levees up close. And the levees have to be constantly maintained and replaced. And there is a whole process going through of not just piling up the dirt, but it has to be tamped down and then sealed so that it will stay in place when the floods happen. Now, when Hurricane Katrina hit, many of the levees around New Orleans had been halted in the middle of the process of being replaced. The dirt had been piled up, but because of all the money being spent on the war in Iraq, they hadn't gone back. The Army Corps of Engineers hadn't had the resources to go back, tamp down the soil, and properly seal it, because the Army Corps of Engineers resources were all being sent to build bunkers and bases over there in Iraq. And that's why these levees were failing. And that's why these firefighters were being told not to talk about it. Because anybody who's lived along the Mississippi knows that properly maintained, those levees should hold up. And these did not. Now, story is coming on out. We talk about the surveillance society. Apparently over in Baltimore, it's leaked out that there is a permanent, ongoing, high-resolution video of the city from somewhere above, and it's playing right to the Baltimore police hard drives. It's a real-time video surveillance system, probably from one of these blimps that are way high up in the atmosphere and you can't see them. But they're watching everything. They're recording everything. Which makes it even more obvious when they let one of these Black Lives Matter riots go out of control that it is, in fact, a deliberate decision here. Now, there's been another scientific study that has come on out. We put the PDF of it up on WhatReallyHappened.com. The study was by Stephen Jones, Robert Carroll, Anthony Sambodi, and Ted Walter. And let's see, mechanical design engineer. And basically, it's another study that goes back and it looks at the 3 buildings that collapsed on 9/11 in New York City. This is 15 years on. We're coming up on the anniversary right now. And these engineers, mechanical design engineers, architects, all came to the same conclusion everybody else has looking at the buildings. The collapses cannot be explained on the basis of the fires. The buildings were over-engineered. Less than 10% of the load-bearing strength of the load-bearing members was actually needed to carry the weight. The rest was to prevent sideways movement from wind, and yes, they were designed to survive impact of an aircraft. And so we have another very serious study showing that the buildings that collapsed on 9/11 were not brought down by fire or aircraft. They had to be brought down by internal demolition. And again, if you look at World Trade Center building number 7, the way it just pancakes right into its own footprint, that's a classic controlled demolition. There's no way that can happen naturally because every single load-bearing member has to fail at the same split second. And we found photos of the wreckage of the World Trade Towers on which you can see demolition cuts from cutting charges. You can see the scars. You can see the molten metal that resulted from the use of thermite. Now, getting on back to Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner, and I just have to shake my head at this guy, what was going on through his head. After all he's been through because of his habits with cell phones, knowing how visible his wife is in politics right now, the idiocy of doing this again, sexting a woman who did not want the attention, sending photos of his manhood with his own kid lying on the bed right next to him. But apparently people just do this sort of thing here, and there's this interesting little story about this millionaire down in Florida, Scott Mitchell, and he was in a legal fight with this lady, Mary Hunt. They were engaged to be married, then he broke it off, and she left, and he accused her of stealing $2.1 million worth of jewelry from the safe in his mansion when they broke up. She came back, covered with bruises and a black eye and everything, saying that this guy had beat her up. Oh, he abused me. He abused me. Apparently, what Mary didn't understand was that this Scott Mitchell had security cameras not just on the outside of his house, but on the inside. And he went public today with videos of this woman beating herself up, striking herself in the face with her own hands to give her bruises and stuff so she could go say, oh, I'm a poor abused woman. I'm a poor abused woman. So that's not going to work out very well. And it is a reminder that one of the downsides of our victimhood culture is that people want to be seen as victims. And they'll victimize themselves. And these hoaxes happen all the time. The Tawana Brawley rape hoax destroyed careers with that one. The endless series of anti-Semitic hate crime hoaxes. The Georgetown student was caught on a security camera painting swastikas on her own door. That professor at Claremont College that painted swastikas on her car so she could say, oh, I'm a victim of anti-Semitism. Hoaxes are out there. There's a lot of them being played on the internet right now, and we have to be very careful between now and November because the hoaxsters are trying to figure out some way they can wreck the credibility of the independent media. And we have to be on guard. About a week ago, we had these websites were being put up. They were exact copies of corporate media websites with domains that were really, really close but weren't the real ones, and they were planting all these nonsensical stories in the hope that we would pick them up and carry them. And it ultimately didn't work because we don't automatically trust what ABC says. We evaluate the story on its merits, and if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense, even if it's got the NBC or CNN banner over it. Well, especially if it's got the NBC or CNN banner over it. So we do need to be careful. Meanwhile, the U.S. Environmental Agency is acknowledging that earthquakes that have started to occur in Texas are likely linked to fracking activity. Same that we saw in Oklahoma. Same thing with the quake that damaged the Washington Monument. And they can't even make money with fracking right now with oil prices where they are, and still they're out there pushing this agenda. All right, let's see. North Dakota governor has declared a state of emergency to squash the Native American protests who are against the Dakota pipeline. And he says he's doing this to save the state money. It's costing the state way too much money to be caring for these protesters out there at the pipeline. We're just going to have the cops, go and shoo them on home because that's what we need to do. All right, we're going to take a break. Back with the last segment of our program after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And earlier we were reporting social media had erupted with stories of an active shooter situation at the Los Angeles airport. People were panicking and leaving the lines and everything. Turns out, much ado about nothing. Apparently, somebody showed up at the airport dressed as Zorro, who is a historic figure. You've seen movies about him. Was based on a real character from the days when California still was a part of Spain. And he had a plastic sword, and apparently the police cornered this guy and drew their guns. He didn't really do anything, but apparently the sight of the drawn guns triggered the panic, and everybody just kind of went ballistic over that whole situation here. Now, latest polls are showing Donald Trump is picking up a huge lead with evangelical voters. And according to Wikipedia, Christians are the largest voting demographic in the nation. Now, as the polls narrow between Trump and Hillary, all of a sudden we're seeing all these articles pour out on the independent media about how polling insiders are reporting that Hillary will have a landslide victory. She is so far ahead it can't be turned around. And what this is an attempt to discourage Trump supporters and, even better, to get them to stop volunteering for his campaign and come November to just stay at home. That's the whole point of these hoax articles. None of them are backed up by any hard facts or any real polls. It's just, I have inside information that Hillary is really well out in front here. She's going to win in a landslide. And they're trying to discourage Trump supporters, get you to stay home in November. Think of the worst dirty trick that you could possibly do if you were running for office and assume that Hillary Clinton's people have already thought of it and put it into practice. Remember, Hillary Clinton learned how to steal elections at the feet of the master, Richard Nixon. She was on that Watergate committee. She got fired. But while she was there, she learned everything Creep had done to steal Richard Nixon's re-election. And she's implemented most, if not all, of them. So make up your own mind, and then make up your mind that you're not going to let anybody in the media discourage you, that you will head for those election polls on November 8th, and that if you're voting for Donald Trump, you should dress in red or have a little tape T on the front of your clothing to make it obvious how many people are voting for Trump, because that's going to make it much more difficult for them to claim that the election swung toward Hillary. And they're going to do it. We're seeing it all over the country already, with all these dead people registered to vote. Even the FBI is saying the electronic voting machines, they're already detecting that they've been broken into. The corporate media is trying to say it's all Russia, it's all Russia. The FBI never actually said that. We're seeing the entire corporate media literally self-destruct its own credibility supporting Hillary Clinton. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please remember, you are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. Thanks to everybody who sent in a birthday greeting. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.